Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. Big update on the new Ferrari project for 2025 today, especially the major changes to the front suspension they're looking to make to their car for the first time in a decade. Major updates as well on what they might be cooking up in terms of a livery after rumours have emerged over the last few days of the very bold approach they are taking in many areas of what we might be knowing very shortly as the SF25. Remember to tweet your thoughts in the comments below, hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Firstly, on a couple of driver things, this I thought was kind of crazy, that Fred Vasseur, who is not really been at Ferrari all that long if you think about it, is now the third longest serving team principal in Formula 1. There have been plenty of changes over the last couple of years. I think it was also December 22 when Stella went over, of course, to McLaren, and then James Vowles happened around a similar time because, of course, Mike Crack is now gone and Andy Cowell's coming over there. And most other teams, to be fair, have been in complete chaos. But yeah, of course, Toto Wolff, Christian Horner, they've not gone anywhere in a rather long time, but Fred Vasseur is now the third longest serving team principal. Speaking of, Williams and Ferrari, Carlos Sainz did put this out today. He tweeted this on his Instagram anyway, it's not really tweeted. First day at work, and here's just some behind the scenes highlights, I guess, here from Williams on what that looks like for him, doing the seat fitting, various other things at the Williams team, getting ready for the upcoming season, of course, looking back at the test there at Abu Dhabi. Quickly on Grosjean, legend in Formula 1 for good and for bad, I suppose. He was in IndyCar for a couple of years, had a bit of a difficult time over there. He is going to be on Prama's IndyCar team. It's just been a big talking point, Prama getting involved in IndyCar, given, of course, what they've done in the junior formulas over the last couple of years. A challenging 2024 for them. Maybe this year will be better. But yeah, of course, they're joining the IndyCar kind of situation, and they're bringing Callum Ilott and Robert Schwartzman as well, names that you may be familiar with from the junior side of Formula 1 over the last few years. And Grosjean, from being linked to Ferrari not that many years ago to now being the backup to Ilott and Schwartzman, is kind of a fall from grace. But I know that people still want Grosjean, wish him the best, I would say, in his future. Liam Lawson as well has been discussing how he intends to match up with Max Verstappen. He's been told by Helmut Marko, basically, don't even try, accept that Max is the best, don't get involved in the technicalities of the setup or the feedback or any of that type of stuff. Look, Lawson is a confident driver. He's not going to not give his thoughts on what he thinks about the car, even if he is being told, look, just drive what Max is driving and figure out the rest later and try and be within 0.3 of a second and at least score a decent amount of points. But Lawson also said he intends to be on Max's pace by the end of the season, certainly going into 2026, assuming that they, maintain that partnership as a pairing. Obviously, this is far easier said than done, but Lawson said this: every free practice session we do, I will have insight into his data. I will see exactly what he does and how he does it. Which, okay, sure, fair enough. I guess I could do the same if I was in every practice session with him. Could I do that? It's another question, right? It's one thing having the data, seeing the information, seeing how Max is attacking the corners and where he's carrying the speed. It's another thing to be able to execute it. But look, I respect the confidence of Lawson, but I'm still not convinced this is going to be, ending in sunshine and rainbows, I guess, over there at Red Bull. I will say, though, for Lawson, there was quite a lot of heat on him. Perez, the drama with that. Of course, the Tsunoda question marks as well when Lawson came in. But with all the Colapinto, Jack Doohan stuff, the pressure on Lawson going into the new year has somewhat died down. Not that there isn't pressure, because there is, and there are certainly still people preying on his downfall, but given that Jack Doohan is under immense pressure even from his own team, Lawson might have a slightly easier time than maybe he was expecting a couple of weeks ago. One more thing from Helmut Marko. There's been plenty of talk on the Antonelli-Russell partnership and how they're going to fare. There was some talk on whether Mercedes should have just signed Carlos Sainz and but promoted Antonelli to Williams, but not, of course, giving him the big promotion to Mercedes. And there's some discussion onto whether there's internal reasons, the potential battle between Russell and Sainz they didn't necessarily want, although I will say that Mercedes are seemingly confident that Antonelli can at least cause some problems to Russell, or they wouldn't have promoted him in the first place. And that's what Helmut Marko says. I don't know whether he's just trying to stir up some difficulties there at Mercedes, because the reality is that Helmut Marko works for Red Bull, but there was a serious belief when all the drama was happening internally at Red Bull, there was the civil war behind the scenes, whatever, that if Marco resigns, there was a clause in Verstappen's contract where his contract would be void, and therefore the deal that Verstappen has until 2028 would disappear. Now, whether that's actually true or not, it's kind of difficult to say because there were recent rumours that Marco had renegotiated things in terms of this power struggle, and that clause no longer exists. But there was a feeling that even Toto Wolff would be willing to welcome Helmut Marko as kind of like their new Niki Lauda, if you want to describe her like that, over there at Mercedes, if that meant that Verstappen, and Jos of course seems to be happy with this idea, would come along as well. So that's why Marco's comments are interesting, because Marco is a Red Bull man, but on some level he's a Verstappen man. And if Max and Marco were to choose that, Mercedes actually is a more sensible future for Max rather than Red Bull, certainly considering 2026, I think they would, potentially still be partners and come over to Mercedes as a pairing on some level. So I think Marco has his reasons, given that potential future relationship with Mercedes, which may or may not ever come to fruition, to, let's just say, throw a little spanner in the works at times. And this is what he's saying: if Antonelli uses his skills well, which he has, he can be a danger to Russell, because I think in an ideal world for Marco and Max, Antonelli would look very good against Russell, and then Toto, if Max was available, would have a relatively easy decision, really, to demote Russell and put Max in the car alongside Antonelli, the future Max, as Mercedes see it. Of course, if Russell demolishes Antonelli, then it becomes a bit of a harder question for Mercedes if Max was to want to do that, if the RB21 isn't very good, because if Russell's leading the team and Antonelli is your, next top driver, you've only got two cars. So I think Marco, as usual, has a little bit of, thinking involved when he makes these type of comments in what future it potentially may lead to down the line. You can't go a week in Formula 1 either without some sort of drama involving Mohammed Ben Sulayem, and here he is again. These comments I thought were frankly remarkable, and I genuinely don't really know what he's getting at. Autosport actually say the same thing, but I'll just share it for you guys, because we know that he's been getting criticised, largely for good reason, for some time. We know that there was talk earlier in the year on how the British media have convicted him or something, and we know that he got accused of meddling in the result of the 2023 Saudi Grand Prix and also the Las Vegas Grand Prix and various other things. He was cleared, of course, of those allegations, but cleared by the FIA's internal governance and compliance body or whatever. So there have, of course, still been some questions on it. But he said this: 3 years of critics against me. Do I care? Was I elected to listen to the media? No. I like the good media, the positive media, and maybe I make a mistake and you can come and criticize me in an objective way. But again, even that whole sentence doesn't, I don't think it implies what he's actually saying it implies. If he's been treated unfairly, he said, yes, unfair, but the world is unfair. Saudi Arabia has reinvested a lot. You look at some of the British media and they go against Saudi Arabia or me. But one thing I would say, go on and see the British Grand Prix. Is it the British Grand Prix? No, it's the Qatar Airways British Grand Prix. Please, you remove the budget, you remove the money. And Autosport were like, hey, what do you mean? Can we get some clarification on what you're trying to imply? And, well, I'm not really sure. It just sounds terrible. There's no way that this will increase confidence in the leadership of Mohammed Ben Sulayem. And even this point is just so strange. First of all, nobody calls it the Qatar Airways British Grand Prix. And sure, it's sponsored by Qatar Airways, but what is the point, right? What are you trying to imply? Are you trying to imply that, these other countries are somehow irrelevant when compared to the money that's coming from the Middle East in various countries? Look, it's a global sport. There's money come from various angles. But I think he thought he cooked it. He was like, I got them, But it's I'm not really sure that that's actually how I read it. But enjoy your thoughts in the comments. For the rest of the video, though, we're going to talk about Ferrari, because there's been lots of talk about this team lately, what their new car's going to look like, whether they can finally be the team to challenge, right? Because for the last few years, yes, there's the whole Hamilton to Ferrari thing, and that's a massive deal because it's one of the biggest driver moves in the history of the sport, and everyone's still talking about it. But also just for Ferrari as a team in general, they've been so far off really for years. They had their chances since they last won a championship in 2008 in the Constructors, and 2007 with Kimi Räikkönen before that. They had their chances in 2012 with Alonso. They had their chances with Vettel on a couple of occasions, and then 2022 was another potential championship win, but it fell apart from roughly the middle of the season onwards. But this year, they were as competitive as they've really ever been in recent memory. They could have won the Constructors. They were very close to winning it if it wasn't for a poor upgrades they brought and then eventually resolved in the middle of the season. They potentially would have been Constructors champions. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, for the most part, did a pretty brilliant job this season, but wasn't enough in the end. But they so nearly won. Had Lando had a pit stop that was a second slower than it actually was, if he had a 3.0 rather than a 2.0, Sainz probably pulls off the undercut, and with Piastri out of contention, that would have been Ferrari's World Championship. That's not how it was. They're looking to win it this year, and they're looking to win both this year, and the possibility is definitely there. Now, there was a lot of talk on the livery they're going to be rocking, and let's have a look at this. So, Ferrari have been doing what I can only describe as like hype videos, because in just a few days, Hamilton is going to take to the track in a Ferrari, and that's going to be a very big deal. So we have here Ferrari in the background, the table for 2, and we see reserved Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Now, what I want you to keep an eye on here is the colours that we are seeing be used, because over the last few days, Ferrari have employed quite a few of these type of videos, and there is one common theme that is being drawn out of them. This was one of the liveries that they went for last year when HP, of course, were coming into effect on last year's Ferrari. And look, this is the red that Ferrari have used for the last couple of years. But it's not the red that they've always used. I did see this today as well here for Motorsport, looking at Ferraris through the decades, some of the various shades of red that Ferrari have used down the years. And I think from the 90s, especially in the early mid-90s, there's some beautiful shades of red in there. I have my preferences on what shades of red that I actually like. I tend to prefer the darker, more cherry reds. I think that fits better. That may be biased, but I think that's what they're going to do again this upcoming year. For example, you know, the 2000s cars compared to the 2010s, where it got a bit lighter, and then 2020. I mean, look, obviously all of these images, there's different levels of contrast, the lighting is different, but just you get a general feeling of what the cars have looked like over the last few years, and this was the 2024 Ferrari before the HP sponsorship came around. This, I think, is the 1995 Ferrari, I think for John Alessi, just for reference, and then this was the 2022 Ferrari, the F175, that had a noticeably darker shade of red. And that's when we get back to this again, because some of the hype things they've been delivering over the last couple of days, the dressing room label, the birthday cake, the table for 2, and in all of these images, we are seeing a consistent red shade be used, and that red shade is something like this. And this is the colour that people are obviously speculating therefore that is going to be used on the new Ferrari. It's similar enough to the F175, maybe even slightly darker. And, Giuliano de Kessa is not seemingly hiding it, because people are saying, oh, it's the same red they're using in all of these things. There might be something in that. And de Kessa says, winky face, like, I'm not going to say anything more for now. So that's the conclusion that people have come to today, is that, as we kind of theorized, the more intense, bolder livery that Ferrari are going to rock is going to be a darker version, something like this. But into your thoughts on that in the comment section below. What really matters, though, is the car quick or is it not? That's what's going to matter to Hamilton. That's what's going to matter to Leclerc. Now, Loic Serra is a very interesting piece of the puzzle here for Ferrari. He used to work for Mercedes. He was very close with Hamilton for many a year. There were rumours anyway that he very much shared the doubts that Hamilton had over the zero pod concept, certainly going into 2023, and, the rest is history at Mercedes since then. Serra has now joined Ferrari and will be kind of like the chief guy putting things into effect, certainly on the aero side. Rumour has it a lot of his focus is going to be on the single lap pace of the Ferrari, because we know that last year in race trim they were occasionally absolutely sensational, but in qualifying, unlocking the performance from the tyres was not always the strong suit of that SF24. The SF23, of course, it was the other way around. So they're trying to find a balance really between the the SF23, the SF24 for the new car, with likely a darker, bolder, more intense red livery, if you want to describe it like that. And lots of it, I think, is to do with the rear tyres. Certainly for Hamilton, getting the rear tyres up to temperature, allowing the car to turn into the corners well, but still on a qualifying lap, get the tyres in the right window they need to be in. That was a problem that Ferrari dealt with last year, certainly in terms of consistency of qualifying performance. Part of that is going to be changes to the suspension. And certainly this is true at the front of the car. So it's been a big talking point over the last couple of years because Red Bull and Newey, they paved the way with the pull rod front suspension, the push rod rear suspension that has kind of been adopted up and down the grid over the last couple of years. Ferrari, though, last year, they stuck with the push rod front suspension, and it was semi-controversial to do so. Ferrari last year, the rumour had it, they said they thought that keeping their suspension as it was in 2023 was fine, because the actual advantage from a mechanical perspective wasn't really any different. But other teams were arguing that from an aero perspective on these new regulations, the pull rod front suspension design is the way to go. And Ferrari are switching to that, which is a pretty big move because they've not done this in a decade. And it's not like their engineers don't know how to do it, but they've not felt like this was their approach for a very long time. And now Project 677, as it's still being described, is going to be a pull rod front suspension design. It is thought that the move has been facilitated by Hamilton's arrival, with the 7-time world champion's driving style closer in nature to Leclerc than his predecessor Sainz. A pull rod front suspension favoured by rivals McLaren and Red Bull is believed to enhance the airflow towards the complex underbody, with the floor generating a high proportion of the car's overall downforce under current ground effect regulations. That's kind of what I said earlier, right? That the push rod has its advantages, but the pull rod, it seems like from a pure aero perspective, is more efficient. And that's why the other teams have gone for it. And it was, something that was probably holding Ferrari back to some degree from a theoretical performance ceiling last season. It also claims the change will allow Ferrari to move the kinematic mechanisms of the suspension further down to achieve a better centre of gravity. So that's what we know so far. We heard rumours the other day they were going to change the pull rods. The reasons why and the benefit of doing so was somewhat unclear until we've seen this discussion on it today. But it is very interesting that this seems to be a decision that Hamilton has inspired. I wouldn't necessarily say Hamilton's been on the phone to say, hey, I want the pull rod front suspension, but it's possible that Loic Serra and the team at Ferrari believe that with Hamilton's style and Leclerc's style being more similar to how maybe Sainz drove the car, this is the way to go to help Hamilton and potentially help Leclerc as well. So it's a pretty big move. Into your thoughts in the comment section below on whether this is going to work or not. I mean, at the end of the day, Ferrari are making a substantial change to their suspension in the final year of the regulations. Most teams, after the first year, they then decided what they were going to do. Certainly after the second year, they then decided, okay, we prefer this approach, whatever. But Ferrari have gone 3 years of using the push rod front suspension. The final year, they're going to change things up. It's a pretty big deal. Like, this is more bold, this is more adventurous than it seems basically any other team is cooking up for the upcoming season. So they are really trying to win this year's championship, as is everybody. But whether conservative or aggressive is the better approach here, I guess that most certainly does remain to be seen. But very much interested your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.